We're not sure whether this was a renegotiation, a restructuring, or whatever else. They've been using these words interchangeably.
Exactly. The president used all of those and more yesterday when he was speaking to the international community, saying he wasn't going to default, but he wanted to have these talks and have everyone show up in Caracas.
Can anyone even show up here? I mean, you have a typical debt restructuring, you get together, you talk about it. But because of the sanctions and because of the point man for Venezuela leading these talks, who himself is a sanctioned individual, who can you really have conversations with?
Well, that was the interesting thing. They brought everybody down there. They gave them chocolate and coffee and all sorts of things. And some of the people who are the U.S. investors had to actually go in a separate room so they wouldn't be in the same room with the two people leading the negotiations, the finance minister and the vice president, who are sanctioned by the U.S. government.
So based on your knowledge of this meeting today, debt talks, as we are talking about, what actually was the outcome? Did the situation move forward?
You know, it didn't move forward. It was really a whole lot of nothing that happened down there. But what it does show, I think, is one, that this government is increasingly desperate. They realize that they've paid most of their debt, we think, though there's some questions about whether it actually entered the banks. But they see another $9 billion coming up in the year ahead, and they just don't have the money for it. And we also see that they're worried about sanctions expanding around the world. We saw the EU just put sanctions on a few days ago on any arms or anything that could be used to repress people. Canada has joined the United States in individual sanctions. And the U.S. is still talking about ratcheting up sanctions beyond financial where they are today.
So you mentioned it appears that they got through these latest debt payments. As you mentioned, there are issues with the mechanics in terms of actually getting the money from Venezuelan accounts into the accounts of bondholders. That alone is a fascinating thing. What do you expect to happen over the next year or over the next, now that there's some time until the next big slug of payments comes out?
Well, today there was supposed to be a meeting of the ISDA, the International Settlements and Dispute Association, right, to decide if it actually missed a payment, because they did pay it, but too late. So do credit default swaps, do they kick in or not? So that was postponed till tomorrow. So we'll see, that's the short term, what really happens there. But overall, what we are seeing in Venezuela is they just don't have the money to pay. And so what do they decide to do? At the same time, they've been cutting back on importing food, importing medicine. People are starving. There's this whole other problem there, which is a humanitarian problem, but also a political problem for this government, who's looking forward to next year when they also have presidential elections.
Longer term, it seems that many think that default is certainly going to be the outcome. And if we hop into the Bloomberg here and take a look at #BTV 4878, this is Venezuela CDS, and we see that they've absolutely spiked insurance against the bonds, really suggesting, and in fact, a couple of weeks ago, we have Capital Economics saying that it's not a question of if they default, but if when. What are your thoughts there?
I think that's true. I don't see how they keep paying on the backs of their people. The other thing that's happening in Venezuela is oil production has been going down. And actually this last month it fell below 2 million barrels a day. When Chavez was in power, it was 3 million. So this is falling month by month. And I think that will continue.